Playing video games is fun. A good video game lets you escape this world and have fun. Video games can convey stories. Good video games convey meaningful stories which let you escape this world and have fun. During the controversial events of the last couple of weeks surrounding Mass Effect Andromeda and Yooka-Laylee, I believe Playtonic and BioWare forgot these important factors. Before we start this video, I will let you know that I did purchase Mass Effect Andromeda. I'm a long-standing Mass Effect fan and had to see for myself what all the fuss was about. So far I'm having a decent experience, but it pains me to say that everything screams mediocre so far. This video, however, will be an analysis video of the situation surrounding the game's launch, which was riddled with negative experiences and PR. In the case of Yooka-Laylee, I was never planning to buy the game at launch, and at the moment I'm quite not so sure if I will ever purchase it at all. I just wanted to disclose this to make sure where I stand on both games. But let's get back to the video and dive into my analysis. Recently, YouTuber JonTron engaged in a debate with Twitch streamer Destiny. After this debate, Playtonic, the developer of Yooka-Laylee, stated that they broke ties with JonTron and would remove his voice from the game via an update due to his stance and statements. Ironically, they said they broke with John because they embraced diversity. An interesting statement that makes you wonder if diversity of thought or ideology doesn't count as diversity. The reaction from the public came in three categories: mass outrage consisting of flaming and spamming forums, mass outrage consisting of genuine criticisms, and mass outrage asking for a demand of refunds. The developer and publisher's answer was not to acknowledge these three sorts of reactions, but instead lumping them all together, staying silent and deleting any threads concerning JonTron, whether it was intense flaming or genuine moderate criticisms or invitations to debate. It is too soon to say with certainty how their sales will be affected by all of this, but on the surface it seems like they created a bigger controversy than if they would have ignored the whole situation. Another game, Mass Effect Andromeda, came in the news because of some awful facial animations and an overall lack of quality. According to many players, including longtime fans, the game was subpar and an overall disappointment. At first it seemed like an honest disappointment over an old series many deemed genius, which turned mediocre in the end. However, afterwards in-game material surfaced, which showed that more was going on, including politicized content for the sake of politicization.
Back home, I was filling test tubes in some dead-end lab. People knew me as Stefan, but that was never who I was. I knew what I could do, and I knew who I wanted to do it as. Hanley Abrams, Andromeda Explorer. That's me. Feels good. Feels right.
Furthermore, people started digging and found that some very controversial figures worked at BioWare, including a blatant racist spouting edgy stuff on Twitter. It remained unclear if this person worked on the game since he left the company after launch, but the damage was done and many people felt the game's controversial content was due to figures like this being part of the company. The irony was once again painful to behold if you take into consideration the overall theme of the original trilogy, which was, amongst others, unity and diversity. In the end, a combination of poor overall quality and questionable figures working behind the scenes turned people down from getting the game. A discount followed only a week later from launch. Now what do these two games and companies have in common, you might ask? It has to do with positive and negative associations surrounding a video game. Call it atmosphere, call it vibes, it's something you feel when someone mentions this game. In Andromeda's case, the game already lacked good overall quality. It was mediocre at best. This might be disappointing, but is not necessarily a red flag. Game companies make mistakes. People will still pick up mediocre games, albeit maybe at a discounted price. Do better next time, move on. People got emotional about the overall quality for sure, but that's to be expected when it concerns a loved series like Mass Effect, which is still seen as a classic for many. However, the lack of overall quality was not the main problem with the game. Examples of horrible writing emerged, including sentences nobody uses in the English language but turn out to be meme-worthy in the end.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
And some examples of writing which spit in the face of established lore just to make things easier for the current writing team.
When we left the Milky Way, the Krogan were still dealing with the genophage. What about the Krogan here in Andromeda?
There's no cure for it. But my clan was starting to show mutation against the virus. A natural defense.
As well as some examples of writing which just plain don't make sense with the established lore, how certain races talk and behave.
You put the colony at risk over a grudge you carried across dark space?
And as mentioned, pushing specific topics just for the sake of pushing them. not to tell a meaningful story. Now here's the deal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with pushing certain topics in games. Horizon Zero Dawn takes place in a matriarchal society with a female protagonist. In fact, the Asari in the original Mass Effect trilogy were already pushed as being a species who could mate with both sexes, giving them a certain gender fluidity. Heck, the original theme of unity and diversity is something everyone tries to push nowadays in superficial ways, but the original trilogy pulled it off.
Never before have so many come together from all quarters of the galaxy. But never before have we faced an enemy such as this. The Reapers will show us no mercy. We must give them no quarter. They will terrorize our populations. We must stand fast in the face of that terror. They will advance until our last city falls, but we will not fall. We will prevail. Each of us will be defined by our actions in the coming battle. Stand fast. Stand strong. Stand together. Pack it out.
Having a Quarian, a Krogan, a Turian under your command, having a Geth under your command, all with different backgrounds, which could potentially clash and sometimes did clash, made sense and brought a beautiful story to experience. Why? Why did the examples of Horizon and the original trilogy of Mass Effect work? Because they had narrative relevance and were really well written, leading to meaning which engaged and immersed the player. There was a certain fun factor or immersion. Think of the story of Reckless Rex and the fate of his Krogan species. The story of Tali and the exodus of our Quarian people, which were both brilliantly written in complex, three-dimensional ways, making you actually think and care about them. Even the side stories, which were easily missed, were brilliantly woven into the story if you found them, such as the PTSD story of an Asari commando who had to shoot a little girl in order to survive. A little girl who turned out to be the little sister of someone you knew, someone very special. Compare this to the backstory of Hanley Abrams, which is thrown in Mass Effect Andromeda in a conversation lasting less than 5 minutes, just to drive home the point that he's transgender. And you can see why people simply don't care. It has zero narrational relevance, zero gravity, zero complexity, zero thought put into it. It's simply there to tick off a theme of the inclusivity checklists. The problem occurs when you start pushing certain topics for the sake of pushing them. It has to make sense story-wise. It needs to engage the player experiencing the game, since they're playing games for their fun and their immersion, their engagement. They're not here for a political lecture. They're here for a quality experience. And if you can do that by incorporating a transgender character into the mix, then by all means do it. But don't do it if it doesn't work. Now add controversial staff into the mix, which are openly racist on Twitter next to this blatant political agenda without narrational relevance, and boom, you have a negative association with Mass Effect Andromeda. Again, stories emerged that controversial staff left the company, but many people were left wondering just how much influence toxic thoughts like these seeped into the end product. Many people play games to escape reality, to forget about our shitty world for a while. When a heavily negative politicized association looms over your game, people will steer clear of it and pick up a game which gives them more positive associations of fun, like say, Zelda Breath of the Wild. To be sure, I am not saying the game is a complete and utter failure. It's too soon to make any predictions about that commercially. I'm just saying that a good bunch of people decided to either skip or shit on this game because of these negative associations. And I'm saying that it has to do with the fun factor, the most important factor when playing a game, which is absent for many people because of these reasons. I'm sure these people will think twice about picking up the next installment of the series. Moving on. Now, in Yooka-Laylee's case, things were completely the other way around. There was no negative association with the game to begin with. Zero. Nada. In fact, many people were looking forward to an homage of a good platformer devoid of any political content. And to be fair, the actual content of the game is probably exactly that. The issue, however, is that the company created the association outside of the content of the game themselves. YouTuber JonTron was dropped as a voice actor from the game. JonTron, however, had nothing to do with the actual content of the game. He simply did a few grunts as voice lines for a character. Besides a small vocal minority being offended about John, Playtonic had little to worry about and could have launched their game and nothing would have happened. Looking at some examples on Twitter, there were really not a lot of people worried about JonTron being in the game as a grunty voice. However, Playtonic thought otherwise. They decided to try and defuse the situation by removing JonTron and releasing a statement they removed him due to his controversial statements which they didn't condone. Playtonic stood for diversity. They tried to avoid a controversy, and you guessed it, instead created one. John reacted with a combination of disappointment and understanding on Twitter, adding fuel to the fire because Playtonic reacted differently towards their upcoming audience, to say the least. They ignored any questions of elaborations on their actions and started deleting threads asking for refunds or more explanation, with the reasoning the threads were filled with flaming and spam. How convenient to group actual aggressive threads with critical threads in order not to have to address the issue at all. Playtonic was afraid that keeping John would surround their game with negative publicity due to his controversial statements. However, since JonTron was not responsible for the actual content of the game and only lent his voice to do some grunts, most people could easily separate artists from the art. To take a more exaggerated example to make the point, in the latest comedy special of Dave Chappelle, he makes a point that he was shocked when he found out his childhood hero Bill Cosby allegedly raped 54 people. However, he still appreciated Bill Cosby's work despite his horrible crimes because he grew up and looked up to him.
He has a valuable legacy that I can't just throw away. I remember that he's the first black man to ever win an Emmy in television. I also remember that he's the first guy to make a cartoon with black characters where their lips and noses were drawn proportionally. I remember that he had a television show that got numbers equivalent to the Super Bowl every Thursday night. And I remember that he partnered up with a clinical psychologist to make sure that there was not one negative image of African Americans on his show.
In John's case, many people still appreciate JonTron as an artist even if they do not agree with his political statements. There is nothing inherently contradictory in this. And certainly nothing worthy of controversy here. Playtonic's reasoning is painfully ironic when you start to reason from their logic of diversity. People started calling them out because apparently the majority of the game company is white and they removed a half Iranian, half Hungarian person from the project due to his opinions. Doesn't that make the company, by extension, racist or anti-diversity? Of course, this is silly. It only further proves the point that their claim of diversity was bullshit and that diversity doesn't mean anything unless you mean diversity of thought. 10 people with 10 different skin colors thinking all the same thing is not diverse, it is only diverse on the surface. The point is that by removing JonTron, Playtonic effectively chose a side of a debate, even if they didn't mean to, and they created negative associations with their game, which weren't even there to begin with. The counter-argument that people shouldn't whine because their favorite YouTuber was removed because it doesn't affect the quality of the game, or the counter-argument that Playtonic has every right to do this, are both valid arguments. But arguments which completely miss the point and misrepresent the resentment of so many people. For many people, it isn't about wanting John, or it isn't about believing Playtonic couldn't do this. It might be for some, but for many it's about the fact that they say they are all for diversity, and they say it's a move to steer clear from the politics, but the facts of the matter is that their actions told people otherwise on both occasions. And as we know, actions often speak louder than words. They lost a whole lot of goodwill in this way. Personally, I was thinking about picking up this game because I love the Banjo series, but right now, I'm experiencing the same negative association when thinking about the game that I just discussed. Even if the game's actual content is fine, which it probably is, my fun factor is already ruined because of this nonsense, and therefore I'm unsure if I'll pick this game up in the future. Coming back and summing everything up, Mass Effect, Andromeda, and Yooka-Laylee are both interesting cases of games which were haunted by negative associations surrounding their games, ultimately turning down consumers. Failing to recognize that many people play games for fun, for engagement, and for immersion, for taking a break from this shitty world and their shitty people, leads to such a situation. In Andromeda's case, the game's content created negative politicized associations, as well as people associated with the creation of it, which were both further exacerbated by the fact that the game's overall quality was already mediocre. In Yooka-Laylee's case, the negative politicized association was created by Platonic's actions, making the decision to remove a person due to wanting to avoid negative associations, created their negative associations, and their follow-up behavior only made these associations worse. Even if the game itself had zero political content, and I believe it has zero political content, Platonic's actions made sure that in many people's minds their game is now associated with the removal of a person due to his perceived controversial opinions. Video game companies should not moralize or politicize their games, not via PR and not via actual in-game content. What they should do is create fun and meaningful games. Fun games can certainly tackle moral or political issues, but the important part is that they do so via their fun factor, their engagement and immersion, and not via a political lecture or fake virtue signaling and statements done via PR.